Hello and welcome to Geekatplay Studio Tutorials. In this tutorials, we'll look how to create some air bubbles. Mostly if you do underwater scenery or maybe you want to do like boiling water or other things and you want to create some bubbles going inside of your water. That effect will also enhance quite a bit your underwater scenery because you can add bubbles over some object, fish, people swimming or some any other underwater volcanoes. So to do this, let's first create our bubbles. And what's happening, we'll go ahead, create sphere. And I want to actually scale this sphere way down. Okay, we can also have to modify our scaling in our ecosystem. We will use a 3D ecosystem for this. But it does help when your size is closer to what you want to use. Again, this is approximate size I want to use. Next, I want to go ahead and modify material for this. The couple things I want to modify here. I want to go ahead and change overall color, make it a little bit more bluish. Okay, next important, we'll go to transparency and we'll set transparency almost to 99, maybe 98, 96, around that area. So that it's almost become invisible, just slightly. Even kind of hard to see at that point, but when it will be in the water, it will represent about right property of the air bubble. Again, but surface, because of the air bubble in water, it's kind of reflecting because it still have water going around surface. We can modify a couple things. One, we can go make our refraction index at just 0.1 and increase reflectivity. This is one way to do it. Other ways, we can go to the reflections and just increase slightly reflections to about 5%. So let's do this way. We'll call this air bubble material. Okay. And you can always save this material in your library. So for the future views. Also at this point, I think we're done for now. So let's create air bubble object. Okay, at this point, we go ahead, right click, and we go ahead and save our object. So right here, I save as an air bubble. Okay, this when we're done saving, we can delete this object. Right now, let's work on distribution of our air bubbles. The one thing what's happening when you have bubbles, they rise around in a maybe cylinder ways up. So we'll use it cylinder as a representation for our air bubbles area. So what's happening, we'll start doing air ecosystem distribution for these bubbles, but we will use them inside this cylinder. So this cylinder with defined area with our air bubbles will be distributed. In that case, it's easy for us to have to move it, those air bubbles in properly area where we want them to be, or we can readjust them. So to work with a 3D distribution of the ecosystem, not just on the surface but inside, we actually need to work with material editor and function editor. So let's open our material editor. Here we go to the transparency and we'll set transparency to 0. So we want to make this cylinder total invisible. What we want to make visible, it's our bubble. So we click on ecosystem and we'll go ahead and add object. And we will add our air bubbles that we just created. Next, if we go click on populate, it will populate only on the top of our bubbles. We want them distributed all the way through our cylinder. Before actually I will do this, I want to show you one thing that when you start creating underwater, you may have this problem. So let's say this is our cube representation of our water. Let's switch to right here, our water. Take camera, move slightly. Right here we have an ecosystem. So when you go click populate at this point, you will have a 0 instance. The reason is why, because you enable probably decay near foreign object, and because when our object kind of located inside other ones, his will near object. So we need uncheck that box. On that case, it will system start populating again. So just small tip, if you have that problem with the ecosystem do not populate it underwater. So just remember, uncheck the decay near for an object. So till we here, let's work on these options where it says offset from the surface. Right here options where we can specify below surface or above surface, but we need to specify for different points and make random distribution of those. And for that, we actually need to work with our function editor. To access this, we need to click on this sliding icon. So let's click on that. Now we're going inside function editor. Right here you can see the node which is specify offset from the surface, and currently it's connecting to the constant value. To randomize that, we need actually replace with a Perlin noise with our noise. And one thing, I want to take a scale and slide all the way to 0.1. I have it as small a scale as possible. Next, we highlight our connector and we'll add couple filters. Now we will specify this filters node to 1 for the multiplication, and 1 below this will switch to the offset. What's happening in this point? Right now we have a Perlin noise which specify value for us, and it's numeric values from I think -1 to 1, which is specify from white to black. What we need to do, we need to increase those values, because at this point, if we right now, let's click populate, you notice right here it's populating based on the value we specified of this noise. To increase the range, if we want to have it higher and lower, it same increase the range of this population, we need multiplication for this. So to edit function, don't click on this arrow, it will be disabled and destroy your function. We need to click on the arrow on the side. So right here we're going to multiply, and we'll multiply currently to, let's say, 5. Okay, now if we're populating, you notice we increase the range height and low quite a bit significantly for our bubbles. In that case, if you want to have it higher or lower, go inside the multiplication and modify value increase, so it will increase your z x for your distribution for ecosystem. Okay, next what I want to do, it is actually realign. It's not big deal right now, you can actually even modify this, you can preview, but sometimes it does helpful when cylinder kind of representing maybe middle or other area where your bubbles located. For that reason, we will use it offset. So in the offset in this case, we'll set to minus maybe 3. Let's click OK. And right here, you can see we already offset a little bit below. So I kind of like, because it's represent the bottom of my cylinder, in this case, I can modify it. So let me go ahead and move bubbles a little bit closer. Okay, we have our camera. Readjusting. Again, you remember we have it doing this inside a cube. So we can position the cube a little bit better. And you know what, let's change water on our cube to a little bit more murky or tropical, so we can see a bit better air bubbles. Again, remember, this is air bubbles, and in some cases when you're creating some scenery, you maybe want change some lighting or other effect. Here, let's click on preview. Okay, so right here we have our materials, and you can see air bubbles inside, and it's actually depend on what kind of area, light up or darker, you can see better them or less. It's more like real air bubbles. The modifications you also can make to this ecosystem, so let's go back and open. Couple things you can modify. One, you can increase or decrease density as a normal ecosystem. So if you want less bubbles, you can increase size of your bubbles as well. You can keep them all same size or uniform. All other options is also applied. For example, if you want realign, make them more even, or you want make variable density lower on the bottom, higher on the top, or different variable scales. This is all options work as a normal ecosystem, so you can apply them as well. Also, avoid overlapping instance will help. Sometimes don't make the bubbles go with kind of stick with each other, because normally if air bubbles they would kind of come together to bigger size. So again, this is all additional options that may apply to this. Then let's look on one more effect, and for now I just want to delete those cubes. Okay, so right here we have our cylinder with the bubbles. So let's create one more cylinder. I'll go here, and I just want size down to the our bubbles. Okay, I'll take my camera, go above, we'll take our cylinder and we'll set maybe two clear or blur water. Okay, right now if we preview, okay, you can see we have it kind of bubbles in the water, bubbles outside the water, but our surface of the cylinder is kind of untouched. So we can modify this as well to add additional effect. We'll need to select our water. We'll go add ecosystem, not to the original cylinder with air bubbles, just ecosystem to our water surface. Next, we go ahead and add object. And one thing what I did, I created same bubble, just only assign the refraction index of the water to this. So we'll add this one. We'll click populate. Again, in some cases, we need disable decay, so it will populating. Right here, you can notice we have a lot of bubbles. And again, we need decrease density, maybe decrease scaling slightly. So we're kind of matching as well. We can go and modify a little bit offset. So we don't need to use it offset in our function, but I want just type inside. So we'll just maybe set just very teeny tiny offset, so they will actually going to not above, it will be minus. So we'll sink a little bit under water. Okay, if we preview at this point, you will notice they have different colors. So sometimes when you work with materials and you apply to ecosystem, you want kind of modifying the material without overriding your object. So we can go inside the material tab, and right here you notice we have it now ecosystem materials. Okay, and we have a different name, so we can actually go ahead and modify. Right now this is clear water, so we can go ahead and just specifically modify some of the materials, which will apply to all ecosystem as well. Okay, so we can go inside and just have it all this modification. Again, the one thing you kind of need to understand, even you modify those options, it did not change material for the object itself. So if I'm go ahead back and okay, let me do something more dramatic in this case, like change example. Okay, so right here we modified, and you notice we changed globally for all this stuff. The one thing is also kind of to think about that. If I'm going inside and I'm says, okay, I want remove those water bubbles, okay, and I modify ecosystem. So at this point, if I preview, I have a no ecosystem, and I says, well, actually, I want to go back. So I go and I add my object, and I go ahead back to my original water bubbles. So if I even load it again and populate it, you will notice that we still keeping original edited changed materials in our scenery. So it doesn't save the material we modified in global ecosystem. It doesn't save in the object. So if I open another scenery, the bubbles will be blue again. But because we work right here with ecosystem materials, it does remember. And that is due to the Vue pre-caching some materials. So Again, if you want to clear up some cache, remember, you can purge the memories to remove after when you delete it and all the stuff. But overall, your ecosystem, and it's actually, I kind of like this option, will remember materials you modified even you delete it from your ecosystem and then you open again maybe in another area. But again, may affect your also materials if you're creating for some other objects. So let me show some example. We have right here our different sphere or different cylinder. We'll go right here, we'll go edit this material, and I just want to very fast add object, and we'll add water bubble, which is blue. Okay, go ahead, populate it. Okay, we'll click OK. And you notice if it's blue, but because we globally modified in our ecosystem this material, so right here you have it, that global material will also modify it even on that ecosystem. So just something to remember when you work with a small tip with this. But overall, so this is one way. Let's go back to our creation. So it's one way to create kind of bubbles on the surface. Again, other ways I like it better probably. It is, let's delete this layer. Okay, it's work with the material displacement. So we'll go inside the bumps. At this point, we can click on displacement, and again, you can go and we can preload it anything we want, like noise, bubbles, if you can find something more than you like it. Okay, more look on the bubbles. Let's go ahead. Click maybe like this. Bubbles, we can go ahead, increase displacement. And one thing what I want to do, I want says horizontal only. So at this point, the bubbles will displacement will apply only to horizontal surfaces on our material. Next, we can also increase bump map for this, and maybe just drop down scale slightly. Okay, and let's preview. I'm going preview in final, so we have a little bit better quality and resolution for our displacement.